Okay. So, welcome everybody to my little show, Gab Hominem. And today's going to be interesting while we get our other guests in, because more things came up for them that were not expected. So, apologies for that, but uh, this is going to be a pretty fun one, in my opinion, because this week we got not voice actors or animators by what they're here for, but admins and moderators for fan community servers on Discord. Hellbent is MIA at the moment, and Golden One is on his way. Some issues came up on his way home, but at least for now, we've got Nox Kitsune in right now. Thank you for joining me.
Glad to be here.
Nope.
Hi.
So you're while we're waiting on the other two to show up, let's get started on knowing you a little bit. You're one of the moderators for the Lackadaisy server.
Correct. I've been a moderator there for, I think, over a year now. But before that, I've been staff there since about the first year of the Discord's existence, so coming on 3 years now. So,
So
yeah.
you've been at it for a little while at least. Um,
hmm
what's it? What was the situation like when when you first started? Was it kind of like a Wild West type of deal, or was it pretty chill there like it is now?
It was always pretty chill, honestly. Uh, Straight from the bat, the rules were always solid. Actually, they're probably stricter at first than they are now.
Hmm.
But yeah, we've tried to maintain it, and I'd say the climate's there's always been some variation, of course, as different types of people join the Discord and become regulars and all that. But it's always been kind of that very clean environment that you'll see it is today, at least in my opinion.
Well, it's one thing I talked with Newt about a while back, because I talked with him and Hellboy about basically being the community managers more or less for
hmm
those different servers. And this time around, it's a little bit different because we got Hellbent from the Sir Mayhem fan Discord server joining us on this one. Um, but that was, when I talked with Newt and Hellboy, that was kind of the people who basically lead the teams on that. Uh, but
Yep.
as
Yeah, I saw that
moderators,
one.
yeah, as animators, as admins and
Well,
moderators for
yeah.
these servers, yeah, you guys are basically the ones kind of maybe not so much dealing with the grunt work, but definitely uh, definitely in a very active role with everything.
hmm
What does a
Well,
day-to-day basis look like for you in that front?
honestly, Lackacord's a pretty good community. It doesn't require that much intervention. Uh, since the short started, or the I wouldn't say it since the short was announced, but we get the occasional troll that's been started happening a bit more as the server grew a lot in the past year. So there's always the occasionally we'll get pinged, and then it's whichever moderator mutes the troll first. Other than that, really, it's just keep an eye on things, be friendly with people, and when something needs addressing, we'll talk about it, and then we can pull somebody aside and have a lengthy talk if required, or otherwise just issue warnings. The stuff you'd expect.
And like you said, that doesn't happen often with the Lackadaisy server.
Not really. There's always the little things here and there that show up, but there's very little major events that happen, I would say.
Mm.
Couple
So,
times a week we'll get the trolls, but those are removed immediately. But
so
yeah.
when the big issues do arise, how does it? Not that I'm looking for any specifics, but what's like the usual kind of like protocol when it comes to dealing with that kind of thing?
So Lac has a really laid out policy for how we respond to people who break the rules. Generally, they'll get a formal warning to start with,
Hmm.
Then we do mutes. So there's different kind of strike levels you could think about it. So the first time it's just a warning. The second time they'll be muted for an hour, and it increases. And after a few times, we then get to we open what's called the courtroom, which is where we actually discuss a long-term ban, that sort of thing,
Hmm.
which has only been done a few times.
Probably can count the amount of people in that kind of situation probably on one hand, is my guess.
I can't say.
Fair
Not
enough.
many. We have very strict confidentiality. We don't like telling people like what the stuff that happens behind closed doors is really stays behind closed doors with us unless we're pushed to bring it out. So
Fair enough.
eh,
So
yeah.
otherwise, it's kind of just making sure everybody's not really pushing things too far, which doesn't sound like it happens very often in your situation. Um, have you done admin or moderator type of things in other servers or groups?
I've helped as an advisor to smaller servers sometimes. Friends of mine were starting had a smaller server, and I basically just chimed in to give them advice on what kind of moderation stuff they should do, or how to like set themselves up. But overall, not really. The lack of cord has been my first and only major part of being a staff on a community group.
So for any real group, otherwise it's just kind of like, you know, here's some advice on something. That's about it.
Yeah, or like I'll explain my usual kind of talking points would be like this outlining why it's important to have a system. So mistake a lot of I've only had a few times where I've advised, but I get the impression the mistake a lot of younger groups do is they're very free for all in how they will approach intervening with people. Having a clear process removes for you personally removes the like decision making. Oh, how do I deal with this? What's the severity of punishment? If you've got a clear system that can be bent, like if somebody does something really bad, obviously we'll intervene more strongly.
Hmm.
But it's helpful from a certain point of view to have that. But from another point of view, it helps make sure that you're keeping things fair, that you're not if you treat everybody the same way, it makes sure that there you can't be if somebody comes back to you saying, "Hey, you're not you're just treating me differently because you don't like me or something," you'd be like, "No, I literally do this with everybody." So I give I tend to give that kind of advice, like how to what's important, what kind of things you need to think about when it comes to establishing the rules, and how you interact with people, that sort of thing.
Right. And you, being a moderator, you're always watching for things going on in like chat rooms, voice chats, and all that. Uh,
Yep.
so you're basically very active with the community as it is, and not even always being like, it's not like your interactions are specifically like restricted to, hey, don't do this because it's against this rule or whatever. You actually do go out and have fun with the people in your community.
Yeah, of course. I mean, at the end of the day, I became a moderator because I enjoy the community. It would defy the purpose for me to not be able to interact with it as a regular member in some ways.
Right? Uh,
No,
so what actually pushed you to make the decision to say, hey, I want to help out with the server?
that's actually a kind of strange alignment of circumstances.
Hmm.
So you've probably paid a bit of attention. We have a system called PIM membership on the Discord.
I think so. I might have. I don't think I recall any specifics about it.
Right. So you'll notice a few people have a special role called PIN member, which is essentially this is somebody who contributes and is an exemplary member of the community. Uh, the PIN membership kind of highlights them as somebody who's, you can reliably trust will be a friendly member that can help you with the place.
Hmm.
So I was given that role. So I started on the server as a normal member, obviously. Over time, just from I don't not sure of the exact details since they didn't really go through with them. But early on, I was very prone to just being friendly to newcomers, showing them around what things are, telling them about the different rooms and the channels. So I was given that role as a highlighted member that gives that can be come to advice. Then basically, as the server grew, as more moderation stuff was needed, another role the pin members have is advisors. So they can be asked to by the moderation staff, like, hey, what do you think about this? Back then there was just two moderators. It was Koenig and Leo, who is still a moderator today. Koenig had to step down at some point for personal reasons.
Mm.
But as we were kind of figuring out the back end side of the server, the pin members took a much more active role in helping out the moderators for a while. Uh, so I ended up actually helping out by, doing some mod interventions, trying to explain to some people who, like, because some people, when they break the rules, they don't necessarily understand it, or they don't understand what they did wrong, and they need to be explained it to them, or you need to convince them, like, hey, this is important, we take it seriously. So I helped out with that sort of thing. Had a few lengthy discussion with some members who needed it. And then eventually, when Koenig needed to step down, I volunteered to take the job because I already had some experience doing it for the Discord in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, shortly after that, we decided to also increase the size of the moderation team and really like strengthen the moderator role. So Harley, who's in chat right now, is also one of my fellow moderators that got added around then. So basically, that's kind of how our current team got formed. So most of us already had that experience in a way before we became moderators, helping out on Lackagord.
Do you find that it helps out to have already had that kind of trust in that community already built by the time you guys were brought in?
It's hard to say if trust. Well, I mean, it helps that Newt already knew us very well. Newt, Leo, Koenig, the staff already knew who I was. They already knew how I thought and how I talked about these issues, so it helped from a team point of view. The thing with the community is there's always some fluctuation in members, so I wouldn't say there's so much a trust with the community itself. There was like I don't think it came as a surprise to anybody when I became a moderator. Like, yeah, that makes sense. It's just Nox.
Mm.
But on I definitely there's a pretty big learning curve to some aspects of being a moderator, and it helped a lot to already have that for sure.
So how much work in one day do you think it tends to? Because I don't want to say it sounds like a burden, but like how much
It
hard
can
work do you
be.
think goes into it?
Well, it can vary pretty like a lot. I would say there's some weeks where it's completely silent, where you'll have one or two spammers that get gotten rid of immediately, and basically nothing else happens. There's other weeks where we need to have a more major discussion on like, hey, there's this gray area in the rules. How do we feel these need to be enforced? And then all moderators will chime in with their opinion. But and then that can take a bit longer. Or I mean, uh, so those couple a couple hours. But I'd say it's been pretty calm in the last year since about around the time of Christmas 2019. I think we had a full rewrite of the rules where we all sat down together, put in our experience, and just rephrased everything, and to really match the way we saw it, how to make things clearer to the community, what we expected. and I'd say things have been pretty calm since then. It's a couple hours a week at most, and other than that, it's just being there and paying attention, which I would be doing anyway because this has been my favorite online community, right?
Right. It is a pretty fun community to be a part of. I've popped in a few times and just kind of fooled around
Mhm.
myself with some of the people and had a bit of fun. I remember when I did pop into the server, started reading through the rules. I'm like, okay, this is pretty simple stuff, and I keep going. Oh, there's a lot of rules. But at least what I do like about the rules is that it lays it out clearly. You know, what can be involved with these particular rules. So
Yep.
just taking a couple of minutes doesn't do much to get in the way of your day, and it also kind of makes it clear, hey, this ain't gonna fly in this place because it's basically just here to be a place for everybody to enjoy the same thing, which is, in at least in your case, lackadaisy.
Hmm. Yep. And the reason that we have so many rules is also really to maintain the climate, right? Like something that a lot of people find odd is our complete refusal to allow a meme channel or that sort of thing. But it's really because we're trying to keep the server climate focused on open exchange and discussion about lackadaisy or about general things. We don't want it to become another dumping place for memes or that sort of thing. So we've really spent some time tailoring those rules to try to keep the place, make it enjoyable for everybody.
Right. And it's not like the memes that you guys do end up seeing are really wild. Some of them can be like kind of getting there, but otherwise are usually just fun, harmless, and
Oh, if
enjoyable.
they get too wild, they get removed. That's fine. But the thing we insist on is you don't just throw memes like that are not related to what's going on. We insist that if you're posting them, they're related to an ongoing conversation, or that you will also include like some talking points or to start a actually try to start a conversation with that meme. So it's different than just, here's a meme.
uh, how often do you think any discussion with other admins or moderators in the group tends to happen? Whether it's about some serious situation or just like even just casual discussion with other moderators, how much communication tends to happen there?
Every couple days, and anything concerning moderation will, I'd say, maybe every second or third day, something will come up that will just at least say, "Hey, this happened. Let's keep an eye on that," or something like that.
Right.
But like, I mean, I'm friends with Newt. I'm friends with Harley. I'm friends with Moki and Leo. Like, we don't necessarily talk all the time, but if we do feel like if we do feel like we still do keep in touch otherwise. So it'll depend. Everybody's different. 2020 was tough on a lot of people, so you might have noticed some of our staff can has been had periods where they're a bit more quiet, but like uh generally there's discussion all the time just to uh keep things going.
Right. Oh, right. So with all that discussion, it sounds like being moderators, admins, even just staff is tends to be a pretty at least friendly experience.
No.
Really.
Yeah. It is a friendly experience to it is a friendly experience to work on the server together, to develop it, to try to keep everything like good. Having to do a mod intervention fucking sucks.
Oh, that's
Like having to pull somebody aside and be like, "Yo, you're like actually disrupting the server or you're offending people or something like that." It is honestly really not fun to do.
right.
It's a vital thing to do to keep the community going, and that's why we do it. But personally, I have to say, that part can be brutal.
If I can understand how that is. It's like some people can. I've done it myself actually quite recently in another server where I thought it was funny to start making jokes about somebody's laugh from a stream. I just kind of took the joke a little too far,
Hmm.
and one of the admins in that server decided to go into my DMs because making a public thing, I would assume, is not something that's usually standard protocol in most places. But they
Yep.
let me know, hey, this kind of isn't cool. And my first response to that was like, okay, that's actually kind of embarrassing for me that I did something like that when I'm not usually like that. Um, so I'm actually kind of curious as to how often you've seen situations where they just kind of like immediately stopped, even whether or not they actually apologize. They just like they get it and they kind of stop the behavior right there, and it just doesn't become an issue again.
I mean, it varies enormously. Most people will be apologetic, but a lot of times it's like sometimes it's straight up issues that are directly behavior that they're not that's hard to change for them, right?
Right.
So if it's just a joke like that, like I've been in that situation you just described. I'm on a new Discord and I say something I shouldn't have said, and the admin's like, dude, don't shut up. but like sometimes it can be tougher because it's not like just it's not just like the you said a bad you said a joke that didn't fly is probably one of the easier cases to say since to solve since most people are gonna be like, yeah, sorry,
Mm-hmm.
I'll try not to do it again. There's the rare cases of people who really get upset when you tell them that, but that hasn't happened too often. But I mean, there's also it can also get a lot more intense than that. I think Newt, when he was on this podcast last time, or brought up the guy that tried to sue him.
I vaguely remember that one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's a wild response right there to
well, that
throw a
there
lawsuit.
was a lot of wild stuff that happened around that, right? So like there's there's many uh there's many levels to it, right?
Hmm.
But most of the time what I've found works is trying to just understand the person, right? So if it's somebody who's being disruptive in some way, there's usually a reason why they are that way. And if you can get an understanding, sometimes it's just that they're young, sometimes it's just, social awkwardness. Uh try when I talk to them, I try to factor that in, and oftentimes I hope that I can actually help them, because at the end of the day, this like if they learn something about how to interact with others from an online Discord, maybe it'll help them in their real life too, right?
That's one thing I'm always hoping does usually happen when it comes to mods and admins having to intervene in this way. Um, that they actually come away with that experience, learning something about it. I've had it
Mhm.
happen a few times. Not all of them always felt great. Um, like the example I gave earlier. For me, it was a fairly embarrassing thing to have been caught in that situation that I don't like being in anyway. Um,
Mhm.
but other times I listen to some of these criticisms. I'm like, how does this make sense? And sometimes it takes a fair amount of clarification for me to understand it because sometimes things just don't click for me automatically.
Mhm.
But I've been in situations in my past where I've just been completely removed from a situation uh, because I just adamantly refuse, and that's not exactly a fantastic way to go about it.
Mhm.
And looking back on it, I'm just like, probably shouldn't be doing that anymore. And I've had the time after that to start to understand the reason for it. Because
Yep.
sometimes the context just needs to be there and they just don't have it.
Yeah, absolutely. And also that's why if you can like from the moderator's perspective, if you can understand where that person's coming from, you can help them get to that understanding, right?
Right.
So, because like most people don't respond well to just flat negative criticism, and then you just being left to deal with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So usually when we intervene with someone, it's, hey, this is a rule you broke. This is why it's important. Do you want to talk about it, or do you have questions? And some of those conversations can go on for hours, but sometimes we actually genuinely help the person through that.
Right. Uh, yeah, I haven't had that particular situation with myself very often, uh, but it is good that they respond well when they do.
Some do, some don't. You got to
And
try, right?
yeah, and the criticism is kind of an important part because I had talked with Sean Chiplock a few weeks ago,
Mhm.
and when I brought up the idea of trolls just giving him shit for basically no reason, it got into a quick little topic of like, how do you discern people from how do you discern people being jackasses from actual legitimate criticism? And what he
Oh,
brought up, what he
most of them
yeah,
are not subtle.
no, I would imagine.
Uh, I'll put it this way, like we err on the side of caution. We do not like removing people. But if your first words on the Discord are something racist, like that's clearly flagrantly meant to be offensive, you're like it's pretty evident 99% of the time that person's just there to cause trouble.
Right.
And there's no reason to spend time on that. Like it sucks, but they're not there to actually be part of your community, so you're not going to have any influence on them.
Right.
And though,
Yeah, that was one of the things I kind of came up when I talked with him about it was yeah, when you have somebody saying something to you about what you do, but they don't offer any like direction and where to go from it. Usually
Mhm.
not criticism.
No, well, it's useless, right? Or
Right.
I mean, it's like I mean, I also draw besides being a create besides being a moderator, but like somebody telling me my art, I don't get this. Like I don't think I've ever had somebody just be an ass to me, but I probably because I have zero popularity. But the somebody telling you just your art's bad, it's not useful. You can't do anything with that. Saying I don't like this, you're getting somewhere with that. Saying I like this, but actually I think this is a zone for improvement. I'd recommend this thing or that sort of thing, or just maybe look into that part. That you can do something with.
Right.
So it's, I'd say in the moment, it's not too hard to tell the legitimate criticism from the negative stuff.
Hmm.
But also, the internet's got a problem with people knowing how to give criticism or not, right?
Right.
Like, if you actually take a course on this, I mean, I didn't so much take a course on this in my real life, quote unquote. I'm in the automation industry, and I have to give classes sometimes.
Mm.
So one of the parts of it was how to give criticism. My trainer's point was say five good things before you say a bad thing, which is hard. But it sets the tone for if you want somebody to be receptive to criticism you give them, you don't just lay down the hammer on them. They're just going to think you're an asshole.
Right.
So there's a lot of subtlety to that, and it varies. Like there's some people that won't take criticism well no matter what. There's some people who will abuse themselves with whatever negativity they receive. It's all everything's complicated, you know.
Right. So, I guess on that end, I'll springboard off of that into the work as an admin. In that,
Hmm.
uh, do you find yourself looking to uh, like kind of more veteran admins or moderators possibly from like other servers for like advice, assistance, things like that?
Honestly, no. Uh, I mean, I wouldn't mind it, but Lack Accord's always kind of been where we've wanted it in a
Right.
way. Uh, well, that's not true. We definitely have our issues and not, but like a lot of the partnerships that we're getting recently with other communities are recent, right? We've kind of been on our own corner for a while. But it's not entirely true. Newt is in so many servers and knows so many people, but it just never came up. I guess would be my point there. By the time I became like actually officially a moderator, things were pretty well solid.
So it sounds like you guys had all the tools that you needed, or at least the server had all the tools it needed when it got started, and uh, yeah,
We made all the mistakes we needed to
yeah.
make. I guess early would be the better way to put it.
And then I think you said it was about the time that the short came around was when the mod team expanded because of the boost in popularity or something,
No, no, that was
or
a year before about.
oh, it was the year before.
Uh, Harley, maybe you can give more. Maybe you remember Harley's in chat. Actually, we have a cool few people in chat now.
Yeah.
Well, you know most of them, but yeah, the it was about a year before. Like basically, I think it was probably early 2018 that time frame, or maybe late 2018, early 2019. I'd have to check. But I took on the I knew I took on the role, the moderator role, and basically like a month later, we were we we recruited Harley and Moki to the mod team to solidify it because at that point there were already we knew there were some issues to address of how we had been managing things, and the team was already discussing that sort of thing. So we just continued that discussion, made the changes we needed to the mod team and to the staff, and there were a few other changes we did in the background at the same time.
Right. Quick update for everybody as we continue along. We're still we're not sure what the situation is with Hellbent. Hoping he's still going to be able to show up. And Golden One is on his way. Some issues came up with his transportation, so he's still on his way home. But he will be showing up as soon as he's able. So until then, what's what other experience do you have with like probably just observing mods and admins from other servers in regards to like how whether or not you learn something positive or negative from them? How often do you find yourself like observing how they work?
Honestly, I don't spend that much time in other servers. The the thing with mods is we tend to keep things on the low side because we don't want the moderation to affect the climate of the server, which is why when you mentioned it earlier, the mods tend to do things in DMs. It's because if we publicly shamed everybody who did something wrong, it would completely like just screw up the flow of discussion in the room. Plus, it sucks for that person and it doesn't help, right? So it's sometimes hard to see how other mods do things. I have been on some other communities where I've seen the way they handled certain issues, uh, brought those back and discussed them, and uh, we never really implemented anything that I saw in the other groups, just because it really didn't fit the way we do things, or we did try it once and we didn't like it. But yeah, I can't really say there's a lot that most of it is self-taught and just us learning from the mistakes we've made and that sort of thing.
Well, you've definitely learned a lot from those mistakes, at least that you guys made, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Uh, so you've basically been helping out, or at least you've been a part of this particular community for, you said, 3 years now, and been helping out with about two.
Uh, yeah, so the community was, I think we're at 4 years now, I think, of the community existing. So I've probably been helping with the community for about three, actually. Or was it? No, I joined 2017, I believe. So it would be about 2 years of helping, yeah. No, that doesn't feel right. 3 years if you include 2020. Yeah, so about 3.5 years on the server and 3 years of helping.
Trying to remember timelines is always such a pain, at least for me.
Yeah, it's not my thing.
um, so I'm sure you've seen and learned a lot even before you became actual staff. And so, with how chill this community has been, do you find it kind of maybe not jarring to see other communities and how differently they might behave or react to things?
No, well, the other thing is I'm older than most people on these discords, right? I'm 31. I've been floating from different communities to communities. I've been in other communities before Discord, right?
Right.
So I mean, I've seen all quite a few things, and I know what the normal community is. So to me, it wasn't so much jarring to see how other communities are. It's more uh, it's more the how good Lackadaisy as a community is, if I'm honest. It's just part of why I like the place. Like, I never really stuck to any communities that I got into. I usually like make one or two friends in them and then end up moving on. But the Lack Accord, just like there's so many great artists. A lot of people are attracted, I think, because of how much effort Tracy puts in the quality of her artwork, which
Mhm.
creates a certain audience. By the way, hi Tracy, hi Fable. Thank you
Yeah.
very much for the compliments.
Thank you both for joining in
uh,
on this. Uh, yeah,
yeah.
um, I only managed to discover Lackadaisy about the time that the Honeycast decided to do a stream to promote it.
Yep.
Because for the longest time, my like attention on indie projects and all that has been very minimal. Uh,
Hmm.
it was only about the time that has been just invading my recommended list for a long time that I finally break down and take a look at it, and that was at the start of 2020. And then Honeycast showed up, and I let that play because I was lazy. Um, but once I got into those streams, I started seeing all these other indie projects come up, and Lackadaisy was
Hmm.
one of them. But as I watch more of these, I start to realize a lot of the people in these indie projects, these small media communities, tend to be really like chill, just kind of just fun to be around. Uh, Now, Hasbin obviously blew up, and there's just absolute chaos there. But
Hmm.
um, yeah,
Well, that's always going to happen. I think that's a side effect of the size of things and the popularity of the creators and that sort of thing.
I would think so.
It's a bit weird. Like, so one thing I would say that, not to give you an idea of where I come from, I'm not staff on Lackadaisy for anything that has to do with my fandom of Lackadaisy. I'm staff there because I enjoy that community, period, right?
Right.
But when it comes to, and I think we have a very advantageous setup in that uh, we fully run without Tracy needing to intervene herself in the fan group. It's really uh, it really works well because I think things get a little dicey when uh when popularity or when people start coming in to try to get the attention of someone, especially when they start getting really big.
Hmm.
And then on the flip side, that person has to start putting barriers in because they get flooded. So
Right.
uh you'll see people. I'd say like the Honeycast is on that threshold where like we have people even in Lack Accord that pop in sometimes trying to get Ashley's attention for a role or something. So there has to be a barrier that gets created when somebody gets to that level of fame. So I think that's part of it. But
I would
I'm
say
not
so.
sure. Like, there's also just something different about the kind of community that there forms around somebody. The thing with Lackadaisy, is that it's been around for eh, uh 20, 2006 was when Tracy started posting the first concepts, I think.
I've been looking at some of the. I've been going back to some of those beginning comics again, and I didn't actually pay attention to when those were posted. I probably
Hmm.
should have in hindsight, because it looks like it's been around for a while, but because of how long it's been around, it's got a lot going to it.
Yep. And so I think that what the effect of that is it's also filtered out the short-term fans.
Mm,
So there's a lot of the fan base of Lackadaisy are people who have been like invested in the series for many years. So that means the audience is both older and also like they're just a lot of them just really care about the series as a whole. So it's created a very different climate to what I've seen in other places online.
yeah, because they're just there to enjoy the content, not so much obsess over the people involved. Because I'm sure there was a boost when the short came around, and people who were really into Michael
Mhm.
Kovac at the time came in and
Well, there's still a boost. Like honestly, I think the growth rate it has gone up, and I don't want to say that there's something wrong with having a server or having a lot of fans of a particular person around. I'm fans of a lot of the people involved in the short,
mm,
but having a community focused around a long-term project like this, I think, is helpful in that regard.
right.
Kind of lost my train of thought a bit there.
But you guys did manage to keep things under control. It's still a very chill and fun community to be around. Those are the two main words that I tend to use about it, because it's the most accurate that I can use to describe it.
Hmm.
Um, but it's like as you said, you've managed to find a way to get everything working to where you know Tracy doesn't have to intervene or get involved as often, because you guys are able to handle it, and
Well,
that in combination with everybody being so
honestly,
chill.
honestly, like the Newt does an excellent job as an admin. Tracy,
Hmm.
I think she brought that up in the comments just now.
Yeah,
Tra- like it's really a place for by fans for fans in a way.
mm,
We very appreciate Tracy contributing to the server with our art and all that, but it's she doesn't need to manage the place in a way, and that's like she said. I think that's really helpful for her because that's time consuming.
right.
But I don't know. I say that because it's actually something I would ask Hellbent if he joins the server, if he joins the call later, because I also wonder how moderation happens if the person you have to tell off is a fan of yours, because
Uh,
I think emotions will get a lot stronger then.
yeah, I'm not sure. I'm still trying to see what the situation with Hellbent is. Hopefully I'll
I mean,
get that soon.
stuff happens. Like,
Yeah, stuff happens. I won't hold it against him, because I've had situations like that before. Uh,
mhm.
like that, a couple weeks ago, I was supposed to have a stream with a couple of professional sound designers. Uh, one of one of whom I have dealt with personally, and the other I'm a bit of a fan of, and they both worked on the same project that I am also a fan of, but I
Mhm.
forgot to turn on their Discord audio in that stream. So
Oh,
we're doing a take two of that somewhat soon. But
yeah.
it's it's I've had situations where things just go wrong, and you just kind of have
Hmm.
to, you know, do what you can around that. Um,
Yep.
and
And that's part of creating something. So,
yeah, but
uh,
it's as far as I can figure, it's also a part of doing any kind of like task or work. I mean, it's being an admin or moderator is still volunteer work, but it's still work.
mhm.
It takes a fair bit of effort, and for some people, at least, especially in your particular, you know, duty with the server, it takes a fair bit of like strength of will to put up with some of the situations you're going to have to deal with at some point. Uh, so like when I'm running with the this little podcast group of mine, we're trying to grow to promote indie creators and all that.
Yep.
We've got our own server going, and we've already had a couple of people we had to pull aside and say, "Hey, you gotta stop doing this kind of thing because it's incredibly
Hmm.
disrespectful. It's just behavior that needs to stop," and they just keep going. And I didn't like having to do that with one particular case, but unfortunately, we just had to remove them from that
Yep.
community because it was too much.
Absolutely. And it sucks, right?
Yeah, it does suck because it's not something you expect you have to do with people that decided to come into the server,
Hmm.
still expecting to have fun.
Yep. But it does. And sometimes you just have to make those decisions, right?
Right.
And that's why, again, separate your that's again why that advice I gave earlier, having a firm process for it removes some of the emotions, helps you make sure you're not being biased. So like in lack of court, it's really like it's basically five strikes before you get into our courtroom, and then we decide what we do with you in that front,
Right.
which is quite a bit, and very few people have made it that far. Of course, it'll go faster if it's something really awful, but uh, yeah, it's tough, and having to do those interventions is like I don't think it's obvious to the people who I don't think it's obvious to the people who are on the receiving end always, but like moderators do not enjoy doing that. Or if they do enjoy doing that, you've got a problem. It's the same as in a job interview. If you ever are interviewing someone and they answer that they are looking forward to firing people, you never hire that person. Yeah.
Oh, I'd be terrified if I heard that kind of response.
Oh, it happens. There's always the little power trippers and that sort of thing. Most people will have the knowledge, will have the foresight to read up interview processes, because that's like one of the most common things people say. Like, do not blast your old coworkers, and do not make it sound like you enjoy giving people trouble. No.
Right. Um, but yeah, it's I'm still trying to figure it out for myself. But when you have to get into situations like that, I'm not sure if it's the fact that you have to intervene to that degree at all, or if it's kind of like a some kind of reaction to conflict in general that makes me get like I don't really want to say it makes me shaky, but I just don't have a very great physical feeling
Yep.
whenever I have to
No,
deal with it.
shaky is it happens. Like I get physically shaky before I have to do it, especially if it's somebody like the worst of if it's one of your personal friends
Right.
or something like that. The it's just not fun. You don't know how the person's going to take it, and you really don't enjoy doing. It's just there's this weird dread that sets in. It's not like anything else as far as I know.
And it's one of those things that doesn't exactly get easier with time or with more experience with it. It's still kind of difficult to have to do, whether they're personal friends or not.
It depends. You the thing that gets better and easier with time is you recognize the patterns. Like if you've dealt with like five or six people that have the same kind of I sometimes talk in terms of personality archetypes. Like I can say this person has the same patterns as this previous person, and we know it didn't work and worked there, and I kind of can predict how they react. Like there's some like there's a few members that I've had to step in on recently that I knew 100% it would not be a problem, and it would turn into a like me actually getting to talk to them about their personal stuff and helping them out kind of situation, and they would understand from the rules point of view.
Mm.
So in that sense, it gets easier. It also gets easier because you're gonna have less patience in some ways, which is a weird thing to say, but you only have a finite amount of resources, and you're gonna start being able to recognize the people that are just deliberately draining you, also,
Right.
or stringing you on. So it does get easy, but not like the act of intervening on somebody you know legitimately is trying. That part always is gonna suck.
Right. Um, but I guess beyond that, it's it's got its ups and downs doing this kind of work. Um, what would you say is something that you find, I guess, more enjoyable or more satisfying being a moderator as opposed to just being another member of the community?
I mean, honestly, I don't know that like being from a moderator. I think Hellboy summarized this up pretty well when he was when you had him on the stream. But you can make a difference to people. Uh, Being able to guide that decision, and then being able to like know like no, this person will actually get a benefit from being part of this community and will get a benefit from us talking to them, and seeing that play out is very rewarding in some cases. But I'd say at the end of the day, it's not a for a moderator, it's not so much it's not so much that there's a giant reward for doing it. It's that you get to keep your community safe, and having that community is really rewarding as a whole, you know.
Right. Uh, yeah, because one thing that came to me was not so much when you said it's the rewarding part. It's like one thing that came to my mind was like it's not so much you're looking to gain from it, but uh, more like just making sure you have that peace of mind and knowing your community is safe and
Yep.
capable of operating.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what's going on in the heads of the staff. You know what they're concerned about. Where you'll get some more insight into where things are going. So
Right.
it depends on your personality type, right? It's really not for everybody. A lot of people could straight up have panic attacks, and like, but if you can handle that sort of thing, it's rewarding, and it's also, I think, a good skill to learn. So, because yeah, like I mean, being able to recognize how to deal with certain people is not useless for me when I'm in business meetings either.
So it's probably given you a couple of skills you've been able to use outside of moderation on Discord. Sorry. Um, so it's had some level of like I guess help in other regards. Um, you know where your community's at. You know how they are. You're able to help them out when you need to.
Hmm.
You've made some, some good connections. Not so much in like in terms of the media, but there's people in your team that you can rely on when you need to.
Yep.
Um, how often did? How can I phrase this question? Um, how close knit do you think the friendships are within a moderation team?
It really varies, and I don't think it's necessary in a way for you to be friends with your fellow moderators. I think it's more you need to have a professional respect. So I'm like closer friends with some people and barely talk to some others in the team. But like I see friendship as kind of like it's a side benefit that helps, but it's not a necessity.
Mm.
It's a bit like, like you'll hear about uh if you want some celebrity examples, like Penn and Teller, they are not really friends outside of their professional stuff, and they've managed to stick together for 40, 50 years.
Mhm.
As opposed to, you know, but there's also things like the Mythbusters, Adam Savage and Janie Hyman, who dislike each other and don't want to work together anymore.
Yeah.
So there's levels, and it all depends.
Right. Because in the latter case, I know more about the latter really, but those two put on a show that I think that show lasted well over 10 years.
Yep.
Um, and, they've done a lot together, working well together the way they did, especially on camera. Um, but you hear later on as they finally decided to put that show to rest, um, that it wasn't like what you would expect it to based on what you saw on the screen. Um, but they still made it work.
Yep.
I just wasn't sure how like often it is that you make friendships within a kind of a group task like this and helping with a community. It happens clearly, but it's also not something that happens every time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, the way I see it, I make friends in the community more because the community is there for me to make friends in it. That's literally its purpose. And the other members of the staff are like, highlighted members that highly contribute to that community. I'm very likely to want to be individual friends with them.
Right.
But like another thing to think about would be how many of your coworkers do you become friends with, right?
Right.
I'm personal friends with exactly none of my real life coworkers, for instance. But we all get along well, and we have a professional respect for each other, and we work well together. So it's every team's different, and also Lack Accord has a particular way it runs that calls for a certain type of person as at the helm, right?
Right.
So it like I think it's gonna be there's gonna be a huge amount of variance from team to team, from place to place, depending on who's running it, uh, and the circumstances under which they become moderators there also, right? It's always hard to say.
Right.
Like I I'm like I because of my real life profession, my answer usually tends to be it's complicated to everything, as you may have noticed.
It's some things aren't always like really easy to answer, so uh,
Mhm.
I can kind of get that. But it's there's some definitely some analogs. There's definitely some things that I can find relate to each other. You mentioned you don't always make friends with all of your coworkers. Um,
Mhm.
it's what I've one thing I think I've noticed is that online communities like the Lackadaisy server, Sir Mayhem has been whatever the case. A lot of it is very much like whatever size town you live in, depending on what you're talking about. Uh, Lackadaisy, I would assume, I would say is probably more equivalent to like kind of like a small town um, kind of vibe in terms of its community. People are usually all right with each other. Is not especially a lot of like intensity going around. Some things happen, sure, um,
I-
but for the most part,
I'm
it's
not sure
yeah.
because the thing with small town. Sorry to interrupt you there.
No, no, it's fine. You had a thought, and I was basically letting out my breath.
Yeah, the small town, the thing with that is that people are stuck together. But that's not the case with a Discord community. So I think like their small towns are more A small town is a lot more. You're polite. You try to get along with everybody because your day to day is gonna suck if you don't. An online community, I don't think that exactly is the same. Maybe amongst the staff, maybe.
It's Mayberry.
Not sure what that refers to. But yeah, like I think an online community is distinct that people like the in and out is a revolving door a lot more than a small town. People come and go like constantly, and
Hmm,
even the regulars. So it's different in that regard also, right?
fair enough. Because my train of thought was something kind of like, it's not a whole lot going on in terms of like things that happen between each other, but there's
Hmm.
also people you can still rely on, uh, when they need it. Uh, you know, Kind of just like a nice, not maybe not so much quiet, but typically peaceful type of environment.
Hmm.
It just happens to be on the internet where the people can come from anywhere, not just 10 blocks down this road.
Yep. Yeah. It's really I think the online communities are really their own thing. I think people have underestimated them for years, but they've especially in the last year because of all the nonsense, have gained a lot of importance to people also. So I think the appreciation for them has changed a bit, but definitely like the friendly faces from everywhere have been it's been interesting.
Well, you've seen. I'm sure you've seen a lot of different faces in the couple of years you've been. Well,
Hmm.
actually, even since you first joined the community, um, and I'm sure
Yep.
there's been some that you were kind of upset to see go. Others,
Oh yeah, for sure.
yeah, and then others, and like I'm sure there's been one or two you weren't all too thrilled to see show up, but you
Yeah.
know,
Oh, for sure.
yeah. But beyond that, there's the the general environment among your community is pretty chill, pretty relaxed, enjoyable, and um, one thing that I've come to enjoy about it is, as you mentioned before, the um, the artist community that gets involved with it. Once I
Hmm.
had discovered these all these different projects, because of the other streamcast show,
Hmm.
uh, I started to understand a little more about the appreciation for indie projects like this.
Yep.
There was only one other, uh, actually like two other small projects like kind of like Lackadaisy that I've ever gotten into, uh, and I don't think they've actually been active for a couple of years now.
Hmm.
Whereas this one definitely is still active, uh, especially with its
Well,
community.
if you're, are you referring to Lackadaisy as a comic, or are you referring to the short?
Uh, I think Lackadaisy as a thing overall.
Yep. Uh, I mean, that's more on Tracy, right?
Right.
And the work she does with her group. The project itself is like, I mean, obviously, I adore it, and that's why I joined in the first place. Uh, the and it's very helpful to attract people to communities like we're doing. But yeah, from the indie project standpoint, what's been really cool is to see. I'm seeing this a lot more with the short and with now that there's a whole lack of extremely talented people that are doing things in all the events around. But it's really interesting to see all the interconnectedness, like right, like the has been community has been is linked to a bit to Lackadaisy because many of the artists on the short have like worked on has been or still work on has been,
Mm.
and that's also going to happen with I forget the name of it. Ashley's project. Ashley Nichols, who
Oh,
also has.
it's called Farfetch now.
Yeah, yeah. She switched names a few times, or at least once. But yeah, no, like because at the end of the day, I think like the animation community is fairly small and tight knit, and like I think them being a bit more open in an online community to us lets us see a bit more what they do and let us interact with them. It's interesting because I don't know about you, but before Lackadaisy, I have literally never met an animator.
I can't if I have known anyone who was doing animation, I never actually knew of it myself.
Yeah.
And learning about all these different indie projects, I definitely became much more aware of all of them. And
Hmm.
in starting to follow them, I started to become very aware of just how tight knit these communities actually are. They are deceptively small. With how many projects that there are on a regular basis, especially with how long animation tends to take,
Yeah.
you would think that there'd be so many different people working on all of them. But now that I start to think about it, I'm pretty sure I can open up various like old DreamWorks movies and Disney movies and start to see I'm pretty sure I'll find names showing up in multiple places across those things.
Yep.
So with all these indie projects, like uh, I believe Ashley, I don't think I ever got this confirmed, but I think Ashley worked on that Long Gone Gulch short that came out recently. I know she's involved with the animation for Lackadaisy and has been in her own show. Whereas
Right.
there are other people who've done voice acting for multiple projects.
I
Uh,
don't know if Ashley was involved on Long Gone Gulch, but I know like Fable was jokingly bitter about the fact that one of their friends is animating a Long Gone Gulch, and because of that, they couldn't get them for Lackadaisy, right? So yeah, small community and all that.
yeah,
But
it's
that's
it's actually very surprising to me how small that community is, and that's just in the animation group too.
mhm. It isn't to me like because I keep alluding to this, but the automation industry I work in is also like very small.
Mm.
And there's a lot of very specialized little niches that you'll see the same people in around. So I think it's something that we didn't think about because it's all like been hidden for many years, right? You don't think to go out and find out what the extremely tight knit small communities are doing necessarily. But with the explosion of has been, I think the appeal of that kind of project is going up in people's eyes, and it's allowing a bit more interconnectivity between the different groups and all that, and just bringing the small the small communities in the light a bit more. It's hard to say.
Do you find there's kind of a I guess maybe a benefit in having some of these other projects mention uh, each other's project like um, kind of like how Ashley worked on Has Been, but then her little podcast explodes on its own, and
Hmm.
I think she started using that to try to give a boost to other projects like Lackadaisy and Sir Mayhem. Uh, do you
Well,
th-
that's a bit more of a question for somebody like Spike Trotman or Fable or one of the people that are really in the financial side of the industry from a community management point of view to bring it back to the sort of thing I'm
yeah.
involved in. We definitely get a huge boost in membership when that happens.
Now, is
So,
that does that typically involve more the short-term, type of visitors type of deal that we discussed earlier, or do you see a fair amount of people who stick around for the long term?
well, the basically Lack Accord's membership is always going up, but that doesn't necessarily mean the regulars are there's more or less regulars. So it's hard to say a bit. We've gone Lackadays. When I joined it 4 years ago, I think we were a little shy of 1,000 members, and now we're at over 5,000, right?
Mhm.
And a lot of the boost that happened has been in the last year, where the short happened, and there's been a huge climb.
Right.
particularly from communities like the Hunicast community and the Hasbin community. That since there was a bit of interlinkage there, they got to see our community and get interested, right?
Right.
So from a quantity of fans point of view, it can certainly help. The caveat I would put on that is it all depends, right? Like part of why that interconnectedness works is the related material also. People who are really into has-been are people who are really into animation, particularly small animation, very fancifully designed characters, more mature subjects. Has been obviously is actually really mature if you actually dig into what's about, whereas Slackadaisy's got the whole 1920s mobster thing.
Right.
So I think uh, I think there's certainly an important there's an aspect of that where it's easier to retain those fans, but you have to wonder about the viral effect, right? Like if something gets 1 million followers at once, most of those are probably going to be gone shortly.
Right.
So it all depends. Oh, and Harley's mentioning another interesting phenomenon is like the new like having the exposure sometimes means there are again the nature of Lackadaisy. It's been around so long that there's a lot of fans that just have no idea that there's a Discord or a community around it. So they find out about it from a Honeycast or something. It's pretty funny.
uh, it definitely it's kind of interesting to think about. There's people who've been fans for a while, but they never knew there was a specific community set up for it. Um,
Yeah, that happens all the time. We have somebody who comes in and is like, "Hey, I've been a fan of Lackadaisy for 12 years." Uh, Kano says that's her. Yeah, and they just like, oh, whoa, there's actually something big going on, and whoa, what's this community around it? And they get to join. So it's all that's more of an advertisement topic, getting the word out, right?
right. Um, so I'm actually kind of curious as to like how the moderation game has been affected by all this like uh, cross community interaction type of thing. Like because people are fans of Has Been, or because they're fans of the Honeycast, they also end up becoming fans of Lackadaisy, or probably they just didn't realize that there was a connection between the two in some way, and so
Hmm.
suddenly they might even feel more comfortable sharing some of these references between the communities.
Yep.
I'm not
Um,
sure how. I'm not sure if that has made any effects on the
it's
moderation.
affected the fan art. From the moderation standpoint, it brought in so one of the things with communities is people come in waves, right? So when you have a large event, you get in a whole wave of people, and some of them will have like because they all come in from a common interest, they have a lot of like personality things and things that they share in interest and that sort of thing, and that can have an effect on the discourse in the server. From a moderation standpoint, like it doesn't affect as long as they're respectful of the rules, which I mean obviously whenever you get a bunch of new people there's always going to be a couple that have to be reminded. But from a moderation point of view, what it can affect the climate. What's then at this point it becomes it's a gray area between moderation and an admin choice, but it shows it's a way of testing, I think, if your rules really do their job at preserving your community climate. Because like a lot of the people who joined from has been rapidly integrated into the atmosphere of how Lackadaisy works, or how the Lack Accord works. Like they end up fitting in quite well, or and just uh, getting used to it, right?
Do you think they fit in well because of like? Now, I'm pretty sure you'll know where I'm coming from when I say that uh, seeing how chaotic the has-been fan community tends to be on a regular basis, but then they interact in the lackadaisy community, and it's usually pretty kind of like, I guess, mellow on average, but
Mhm.
just enjoying each other's company, not so much focused on the chaos that
Yep.
the other community is a part of. Do you think it's because of that kind of like dynamic between the two that they work well together, or do you think it's something about the
No, I
community
think
itself?
I think it's the established climate of the Lacquer community. When you join a new group, you're not going to necessarily want to act crazy and do it exactly when you're act exactly the way you did in a different community, because that might not pass there. And honestly, it wouldn't in Lack Accord. We have many people. If you're being disruptive, you will be told, and that's not even just the moderators. So I think it's just sheer human condition from being, when you join a group, you tend to adapt to that group, or you tend to be excluded from that group, and those people leave. It's just how it is in a way.
Right. Let's see. Yeah, it definitely seems like see, it kind of seems like dealing with people is a lot easier than most people would make it sound like. You know, the whole common cliche is like, oh, I hate people. Most people are just, chaos, just trying to cause trouble and all that. But from the way it sounds, at least with the lackadaisy community, it sounds like people are usually actually pretty understanding and, capable of
Hmm.
cooperating. Um,
Well, again, the ones who stay.
yeah. Um,
The truth is, it always depends, right? Like if your environment that you've set as a if the environment you've created is 8chan, expect people to behave like you're in 8chan, if you know what I mean.
yeah.
If you're very like the reason, like again, the meme thing I mentioned at the start, or the reason we actually used to be even pretty strict on people using all caps messages. We've chilled a bit on that. But like the reason those rules are there is because it sets the tone. And it helps people like get the feel of how we want that community to be and how our current batch of members want tend to behave, right?
Right.
So in a way, we architected the rules around keeping things that way. In another way, it's also the types of people in the community. I don't know if you've ever joined a community that's predominantly younger.
Uh, I've been around communities like that. No, like one thing I've noticed about has been at least is that there's definitely a lot of teenagers who become fans of it. Um,
Mhm.
I think it's also been the case for. No, actually, I think it was mostly has been that's grown a massive teenage population in terms of its fans.
Sure. And like as an art form, as an art piece, has been would definitely be appealing to teenagers, and that makes sense. Uh, but like communities are kind of, once they've built up, they have their own inertia in a way. So Lackadaisy, I think we're a bit younger now than it used. It's a bit younger than it used to be, maybe in demographics, but like the average member has always been around 18 years old. So it's like the kind of people who then fit into the group or join it. It's a little different, you know?
Right.
And even the younger members, they'll tend to be, when they see that nobody else is, getting super like chaotic, they tend to dial it back.
Hmm. That's actually kind of interesting. A lot of the interaction I've had tends to be very, I guess, for lack of a better term, shit posty.
Yep.
But then you have, a lot of the. I've seen, you know, adult members and communities also getting into that type of behavior, but
Oh,
they don't
sure.
go overboard with it usually. Um, Other times it's usually just like hey, this, kind of thing just kind of happened, and it can turn into its own
And,
little combo.
and to be clear, when I was mentioning younger, I'm playing with averages and stereotypes because they're kind of a gauge, but you absolutely can't treat them as a rule, right?
Right.
There's older members that will be extremely chaotic, as you described it, and there's younger members that will be extremely mature. We've had both.
Oh yeah.
And like it's you pay attention to that sort of thing and you can alter it, right? Like from a community management point of view, if you're at the newt level where you're the actual admin, I think you'd need to think about who am I appealing to and what do I want this community to be, and then that's where part of the tone of the rules you set needs to come from.
Right. Uh, it's oh man, wow, I just blanked hard.
No worries.
Um,
You're just killing.
a second here. I know I had it. Ah, crap. It's right there on the tip of my tongue. I know I freaking had it. Mm, I know it's right there. I'm trying to remember what it was. Because if I remember correctly, it was going off of something about. Oh, that's what it was. Um, in seeing how the dynamic works between typically the two different age groups, um, it's one thing that's definitely helped reinforce one of the ideas that has been kind of growing on to me lately is that um, I guess stereotypes may have been formed because of something that does or did exist before. Uh,
Mhm.
but trying to lump everybody into one stereotype based on a few instances of behavior doesn't exactly fit all the time because
Well,
there's
that's
always going to be people who are exceptions to whatever rule.
I mean, that's when you get into profiling and discrimination,
Right. Um,
which is very bad. Uh, yeah. Like the age demographics help, and it's documented in a way, I think, that there's certain interests and things that change as far as behavior goes between the age groups, and don't think it's controversial for me to say that.
mm,
But yeah, you got to be really careful about like when I analyze somebody, I'm like there's a running joke that I've started on the Discord where whenever somebody says something, uh, whenever somebody says something that annoys them, I respond with that person's weakness is cataloged. But there's a certain truth to it, whereas a moderator, I'm always paying attention to what kind of people each person is. I try to understand them, and I do it from a standpoint that I want to be able to help that person properly if they ever end up in my conference room.
right.
Uh, which is why I do it. I like it's because I know the advice I need to give a 14-year-old is going to be very different than the advice I would give a 40-year-old. And that's why I do that sort of thing, why I pay attention to that sort of differences. But there's also dramatic differences between individuals also.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of the
So,
main thing about it is you don't want to treat everybody the same way because individual circumstances are always going to be different between each case.
yep.
You, you don't want to go around and say, all 14-year-olds, tend to behave this way with their exceptions, but it can be that some things are in common between, when it comes to this particular circumstance.
Hmm.
But trying to lump everything into like one category or one broad category doesn't exactly work with everything, and that's kind of why I say that it's that getting into these communities has kind of taught me that everything is going to be different no matter what circumstances are in common, because
Yep.
all those circumstances can be different between each individual. Even if it's two people who have very mostly similar circumstances, they grew up in the same town, they were born at the same time, same household, even whatever the case, they could still
Hmm.
have had their own different things. Like one of them slipped and fell and then hurt themselves, the other didn't at that time. And so one knows, what that feels like, the other doesn't quite.
Hmm.
So that can, you know, that can have a minor difference in how, they generally behave. It could have a very dramatic difference between the two. Um,
Yep.
but then you start to consider how many of those circumstances can be different.
Hmm.
And I feel like that's kind of one of the big things to one of the big important things to consider when it comes to the moderation kind of work.
Depends what kind of moderator you want to be, right? Like to me, it's important for preserving the kind of tight-knit respect in the community that the moderators understand the members when we talk to them.
Right?
So there's definitely also like if we were like instead of 5,000 community members, we were 100,000. I don't know how feasible it would be for a moderator to know everybody to the level it needs to be able to identify some of their personal quirks. So that's why everything's going to be different. There's going to be a huge difference between a big community moderator and a small community moderator.
Okay, I can see how that could be. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, from the at the end of the day, if you could like reliably predict people and how they'll behave based on a few the little bits of information you get from talking to them on Discord about their past, the CIA would have a wonderful career for you. That's scary.
It can take a fair bit of I don't want to say mental capacity, but like it can take a fair amount of like thinking and or critical thinking and a lot of time trying to understand things uh,
Hmm.
when it comes to that kind of deal, which is how I think uh, your little quote there can actually fit very well. Uh,
Yeah.
so like I do wish the other two would have been able to make it. It seems Golden One may be making it at the tail end of this. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, because he was trying to catch a train, first canceled on him, second canceled on him, and so he's taking a taxi, which is still on its way.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah, and then still don't know the situation with Hellbent so far, so this, I don't know, this could potentially become a two-parter. I'm not sure yet. Um, but yeah, it's between the two. Uh, it's I can easily go to when I talked with Hellboy and Newt a while back because Hellboy helps out not only with Hasbin but the Honeycast, which is a massive community, um,
Hmm.
and that's a community that's the size it is now, having been closed off and only opened briefly a few times. Um, but the amount of things he's had to deal with um, can be a lot,
Yep.
even though he's one guy in a team. Meanwhile, in the situation of Newt, which not quite as large a community, but I think that works to the advantage of it. I think you've mentioned this earlier because
Hmm.
there's not a whole lot to get in the way and keep track of. Not to mention, it doesn't leave a whole lot of like, I guess, reason to be chaotic and disruptive.
Hmm.
Um, so trying to imagine the difference between the two communities can be, I guess, interesting to analyze, but not practical to actually compare the two. Uh, Not just because of the
Well,
size, but because of the general feel.
it's also important to like pay attention to like, it's there's definitely value in comparing the experience, but I'd say probably one of the bigger differences is one thing you've mentioned that has been got their following almost overnight, right? Very quickly.
Hmm.
So, and us, meanwhile, it's a couple hundred members every few months, right? So because it's slower, the members that join us have more of a time to integrate.
Right.
It's the difference between having a few people walk in to join a village and learn how it works a few at a time, and a village just having a million workers walk down on it and turn it into a city overnight, right? It's the what's going to happen is very different, and I'd say keeping control of the climate of a place in a situation like that would be extremely difficult. I was actually joking with the or it was on a patron stream the other day. I was joking that if we had like a video go viral and we suddenly had a pile of members uh, start coming into the Discord, I'd have to take call in sick from work to just police the place for a few days.
Ooh.
But Fable actually had a good response to that, which was we actually probably would just close the Discord until things died down a bit.
Hmm.
I'm not sure what the decision Newt would make at that point is, or what we would make as a team. But if you like, it wouldn't necessarily be worth it to allow your community to get flooded with members that might not stay. So there, it's all it's an art, right? Like, and it's a new art that people are discovering.
Oh yeah.
There's books on community management, and all that stuff. I started reading one once. It was funny because it was all about how to make what you're doing actually obvious to a parent company that's paying you as a community manager so they don't fire you. But yeah.
The let's see. I guess one thing I want to try to touch into is kind of like the there's another one I'm trying to figure out how to word correctly because I tend to sometimes I tend to put things in a form that doesn't quite make sense or goes in a different direction than I want it to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I guess one way I want to ask is how much of an impact, or what kind of an impact um, that becoming a moderator for this community has had in terms of your life, whether it's like personal, professional, whatever the case.
That's a tough one because the thing with analyzing how somebody's life goes is there's always multiple things happening, right?
Right.
So like Lackadaisy, I joined Lackadaisy in 2017. At that point, I was in my second year of my current career, which has been rapidly changing throughout all that. Uh, so, uh, in some ways, I would say it's kept me sane. Like, I've had a rougher patch in 2020 where I getting just and this wasn't necessarily the moderation side of the community, it was just the community and the events around it and being able to hang out in the Fable streams and just make jokes at everybody was
Mm.
really helpful from a morale point of view. But uh I think it's given me more confidence when it comes to my ability to deal with people,
Mm.
because I was never really in a position to do that much before. But like it happened simultaneously to me going from never having been comfortable giving presentations in my life with starting to teach people 50 who are 50 years and have 50 years old and have like decades of experience on me in my industry how to program certain things, right?
Right.
So there's been so much going on at the same time that it'd be hard to isolate one variable. The only thing I can say for sure is I do feel it's been positive, and I've just met so many lovely people in the community that have become my friends, and I have enjoyed and continue to enjoy just being able to be part of it.
All right. So you said it's made you a little bit more confident. That's actually always good because
Mm-hmm.
there was a while back I talked with Mama Luigi, who I don't know if they're still here or not, but
Mm-hmm.
I talked with Mama Luigi and a few others from the Honeycast moderation team, uh, and so one of them, Leaky Wolf, she had basically said that her doing Twitch streaming uh, made her a lot more confident and uh, I guess a lot less anxious or
Yep.
much more comfortable and being in more of a public sphere. Um, and
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, it sounds like doing moderation work has also had a similar effect.
In a different way.
Yeah,
This is the first time anybody's really focused on me in a public space, right?
right,
I usually am the background guy who cracks jokes at everything because I'm not usually the focus.
right.
But the where it's helped is my ability to, like, I'm confident now that when there's an issue, I can deal with a person.
So you see, it's
I'm
helped you out with your ability to deal with maybe not so much confrontation, but you know,
somewhat confrontation, but also I still struggle with confrontation through voice or in person, because that's different than confrontation in a text. But it's certainly helped overall.
so it's helped. Not exactly the total game changer, but it's kind of helped a little bit more experience or a little bit more like ability to handle it. Um,
Yep.
and then you've also made some good friends over your years of being in this community, which is also a massive plus, especially nowadays.
Mhm.
um, when it comes to that moderation and then working with others, um, how much would you say that people really like understand the moderation work very well?
You mean the people who are receiving are being moderated, or the other moderators?
Uh, I guess we can touch on both. The main one I want to focus on is just the general community members. Uh,
It,
do you think they have a good idea of the kind of work that goes into being a moderator?
uh, hmm.
And I don't mean that in a way that's like, oh, they will never understand. I don't mean that as like a put down, but
Yeah,
uh,
I know what you mean.
yeah.
Usual answer, it's complicated. Um, it depends, right? Like, so I think everybody who's been on the internet for some time gets the idea of what a moderator does. Like, yeah, you're the one who's there to make sure that people don't post dick pics and that sort of thing.
Right.
Uh, and the basics of that. What I think people don't realize, know so much, is some of the stuff I touched on today. That, like, when there's an issue, we'll actually sit down with a person, spend the time with them, and actually work stuff out with them, make plan, or like tell them what they need to improve, that sort of thing. Uh, we there are I've gotten the impression some people that think the moderators just throw people out when there's problems.
Mm.
And I think that's the side that, and honestly, I think there are moderators that are that way. Like, just, you're not behaving, get out. And I don't. That's not the way we want to run our, like the Discord. Like, one of the other many years ago, one of the other moderators, Leo, made a point about this where he which actually stuck with me, which was what we do here and what we're kind of in control of as moderators can be a really important part of a lot of people's social lives on the internet. And like, I think some people don't realize the level of respect for that and how seriously we take it in some ways. Not everybody, like a lot of people do realize that, especially some of the people who have been through that talk with us once or twice, right? uh, People quickly realize some things. There has been some issues with some people assuming that because they don't see what we're doing, that we're not doing much also. So there's also some work from moderation at the point of view to plan how you approach things or how you respond to things in a way that people will still know you're doing your job also, right?
Right.
So there's some of that we've had to learn over the years too.
Because you don't want to get people to learn about the kind of work of moderation by just throwing all the behind the scenes, stuff that goes on out into the public eye, because that can make for a different
No,
type of tension. Uh,
yeah, thankfully
whereas,
that's never happened. But like, we would. The only circumstance in which I could see that even being acceptable is if somebody is publicly lying about their interactions with you.
mm,
And fortunately, we've not had any serious cases of people misrepresenting us that way.
it would be, I think it would be, yeah, I think they would be a little hard pressed to be able to pull that off. Uh, Especially after
We're
my
really good
interactions.
at finding out when people are talking about it. It's funny.
Because especially
That
after my interactions with not only Newt but a few of the moderators and admins of the Lackadaisy Discord,
mhm.
it's kind of difficult to be able to uh, make any kind of a reasonable claim about that kind of thing.
No, we've worked really hard to make it that way.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it's one place that I can always like look to just to kind of like see just a generally relaxing, comfortable, vibe going on that I don't I'm not going to expect to see, some big issue coming up like somebody will, mention, this kind of thing happens and there'll be like a little bit of a discussion around it and then
Hmm.
eventually some kind of joke comes up and topic just hard left turns into that, that joke and making variations of it, playing off of it.
Sure. And we've tried like there's tricks to how it became that way. You might have seen our self-deprecation jar joke.
I don't think I have.
Okay, so I we have it set up on the bot. If somebody is shitting on themselves, you can type jar dash jar, and there will be a picture I drew of Nina holding up a jar that says self-deprecation equals $1 that pops up. But like that sort of thing, it's a joke. It's there to kind of alleviate the situation, but also in a way, it's a way for people to remind somebody that this might not be the place and that it upsets people when you do that.
Hmm.
So there's little subtle things you can do that way, you know? Or not so subtle in that case.
Well, I think the subtle way works because it's not like so blaringly obvious and distracting when it
Hmm.
becomes that way. When it's subtle, it can become uh, kind of like an enjoyable kind of joke. Like, quite honestly, that kind of idea is actually pretty funny.
Yeah.
Just like, hey,
Like,
here's a joke where I'm saying I'm, an absolute freaking goofus that doesn't know how to do, X. Just type
mhm.
that in there, and somebody gets a, I'm pretty sure everybody that's immediately there able to see it gets a laugh.
Yeah.
Uh, so it's definitely one way to help like ease the environment into that kind of like
Mhm.
that feel that you want to go for.
Yep.
Uh,
And
yeah.
that's an important thing to think about because you also like every intervention you do affects the server climate. If you saw us publicly jumping at somebody for doing something all the time, it would feel like a weird place to work because it'd feel like you're being watched by a hawk all the time or something like that.
Mm,
Uh, Same way as if we didn't step in and we just let these things go. Uh, like bad like the things can get really you can get the impression that there's some kind of chaos even if sometimes there isn't, like that the moderation staff is going to step in or they're selectively not to. You have to be really careful of that sort of thing, and that's there's not really a good way to get to that point besides just experience and just thinking about it and talking to your team and all that.
right. Talking to the team is also one of the interesting things because it's Yeah, when you're talking with the community, there's usually a lot of different people who can provide like a quick little laugh or some interesting little
Hmm.
topic to give the community some activity, something interesting to talk about. Uh, and then when it comes to admin teams discussing with each other, I'm sure the same thing can happen. A joke can come up. There's some kind of fun that can happen with it. My favorite example I like to go to is the Honey Staff, uh,
Hmm.
which is the Honeycast server. They're moderators and admins, and they have their own entire Twitter account where they're constantly posting jokes and other interesting little situations amongst
Yep.
themselves, and sometimes with Ashley herself. Um, but I think that's a rare circumstance where you know mod teams like that decide to have a public face like that.
Yep.
Um, but I'm wondering um, if that is kind of I guess, a somewhat. I'm wondering if that's an example in probably the right direction of how a moderator team tends to interact with each other.
So I'm gonna surprise you with my answer. It's complicated. It depends on your community. It depends on the types of moderators you are. It depends what your community responds to, right?
Right.
The very calm, laid back, mature climate of Lacaccord makes it so very, uh, we're very, people are, recognize what kinds of, people, or people expect the kind of, laid back moderators to just step in and like, hey, this is the problem, this is what happened, let's just chat about it.
Hmm.
Whereas more high energy community like has been like the moderators being like part of the kind of mythos of the place in a strong way probably has a positive impact also. So every place is going to be different, every team's going to try something different, and at the end of the day we're all just learning together what works, what doesn't. uh yeah.
So it sounds kind of like the what you guys generally go for is not so much like, because as you mentioned earlier, it's not that you guys are all like really close friends with each other because it's not exactly a requirement. Um, as long as you guys are all able to just work together uh, and be able to do what's needed.
Yeah, for the most part we're friends, like, don't get me wrong, I just didn't want to highlight that's not important.
Right. Um, but at the same time, it's also you guys. Yeah, as you just said, it's the focus that you guys are going for is that you, as moderators and admins, are approachable and able to be talked to about the
Yep.
situations that come up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have inadvertently, and I have learned to be more careful about this, scared the shit out of people before.
Really.
Yeah, because if you like, so I'll put you in this situation when you do need to be spoken to on the lack accord. There's two rooms. There's either the conference room or the muted room. You're
Right.
given a role that then, if you're in the conference room, just gives you access to see that room, so you still can interact with the server normally, but it's a place for the moderators to talk to you. If you're put in the muted room, you can see nothing but that room. Everything else on the server just disappears for you.
Hmm.
So if there's a pause or any uh like when somebody gets put there, it can freak the heck out of them,
Hmm.
especially the muted room, because they don't know what's about to happen. So the key thing is to quickly, rapidly tell them, like, hey, this is the situation. Uh, are you in trouble? Not like quickly set the expectations so that they know they're not about to get thrown on their face. Because I think Kano was commenting about this in the comments earlier. A lot of places are like what I was describing earlier. They just throw people out without much logic or consideration or respect when people are judged disruptive. So there's a lot of concern people have there. So there was one case where I scared the shit out of somebody. They What they did was a misunderstanding,
Hmm.
but we didn't know that at first. So I laid it out for them, And because we were really unsure about the situation, me and the other mods were talking about it a lot in our private mod channel where we talk about these things. Um, so that pause there where he says something to me and then we need a few minutes to deliberate, I think scared the guy. So I've tried to be more careful with that sort of thing, but it's another thing you need to worry about as a mod. You got to remember that people aren't necessarily like, even though like I try to be a chill guy, I hang out with the community, I don't want to be a figure of authority. Some people, especially if they're new to the Discord, might see you that way automatically due to past experiences.
Right.
So it's something to be really careful with, because the worst thing you want to do is just freak somebody out. Or there's people who will, the second you try to talk to them, even though they're not really in trouble, they'll run away from the Discord, right? It doesn't happen so much anymore, but we've had cases where it's like the person was in line for a 1 hour mute, and instead we had to ban them because if you walk out on us during during a moderation intervention, that could be a way to circumvent the ban rule or the mute rule. So then they'd have to approach us externally to the server and be like, "Hey, I want to talk again." But yeah. Anyways,
But that's not something that really happens often, though. At least in terms of how that kind of result is.
well, we do have the occasional person who get frustrated with the. It hasn't happened much in the past year or so, but not like somebody walking out on you because you're calling them out for the way they said something that was offensive or whatever. Them just getting really angry and walking out is something that does happen.
Right. Uh, oh well, I had a response to that, but again, I lost my train of thought on that. But yeah, it's
No problem.
it's good that that you guys make yourself so approachable for it, um, yeah,
You try.
because it leaves that room open for not only for a situation to be resolved peacefully. You know, that's obviously something that we all want regardless. But
Mm-hmm.
um, for me, an equally important part of that is leaving that room for somebody to improve upon themselves in whatever way it could be. Uh,
Yep.
you know, learning not to make jokes about some particular subject that's especially distasteful or
Mm-hmm.
something that's especially like disrespectful or something, or even just like you know tone it down at least a little bit, please. Not so much because something is annoying, but whatever the case, somebody just would like to have a little bit more silence or focus on something, whatever it is. Um, there's the room for things to be taken care of and for something to improve. And
Mm-hmm.
for me, that's the important part because we don't tend to leave that, at least in my experience, we don't tend to leave that room for something to get better. And it
Yep.
tends to go to this like point of stagnation where things just keep repeating because we're not doing anything about it.
Yep. And that's a balance that also goes back into what I mentioned earlier with community perceived perception on whether or not you're doing your job. If you allow somebody to repeatedly do the same thing over and over again, and you're just doing a light punishment in the background and nobody knows about it, people are going to think you're just letting this person run wild. Uh, but yeah, like that's why we give a lot of chances in Lacquercore. Part of the rewarding parts of being a moderator is you get to help some people learn how to behave better, and sometimes it can help them out, but that won't happen if you throw them out in the first offense.
Right. It, obviously it's not always going to be the first situation that everything gets suddenly gets better. Um,
No, no,
that,
there's been plenty of people where we gave them all the chances. We're like,
yeah,
sorry, like, at the end of the day, your duty is also to the community. It's not to save individual members. If
yeah,
this person is like actively damaging the community and they're not correcting their behavior, you don't have a choice. You have to do something.
right. So that can definitely be part of what I don't want to say it makes the admin job or moderator job very so freaking difficult, but sorry, blender going in the background. But it's because you have to keep that balance. You want to make sure the community is safe and happy about what's going on, but you also want to help you also want to help improve the situation while
Hmm.
being able to handle yourself in taking care of it. And it's part of why I think doing admin and mod work is, I guess, underappreciated. Could be one way to put it, but definitely not quite as understood as I think it should be.
Hmm.
Because there's a lot that goes into it, a lot more than just, hey, I'm put in charge of making sure rules are followed here. It's a lot more nuanced than that.
If you're good at it,
Yeah,
or if you're actually trying, I should say.
if you're actually trying, and that can definitely be the important part, because you're obviously not everybody's going to get being an admin immediately. It can still take
No,
a bit of adjustment in learning how to do it correctly.
sure, and that's one of the challenges, right? Like a lot of communities you find are just rad. Like it wasn't an experienced community manager that started; it was just some guy. That's kind of how it happened with us, but just we were fortunate in that everybody, a lot of the people involved at least, were very good at learning, adapting, and becoming like growing into with the community into the roles that we needed to have.
Right. Uh,
Uh, had another point, but I forgot it already.
it's the curse is spreading.
Yeah.
um, so I guess if there's nothing else, final question I'll have for you is if there's any particular like advice that you'd like to give to anybody that's listening, or to anybody that's trying to do the same thing.
I think. Hmm, well, I need to reflect on this one. Last time I was given the opportunity to give moderation advice, I think I produced like 3 pages of text. Uh, I think at the core idea is if you respect your, like the main things to focus on is respect your community. Keep in close mind how what you do and say will affect that community. The point I wanted to make earlier that I forgot is like the other thing that can go wrong, and I'm sure everybody's been in a community like this where you feel like the moderators can throw you off at a hat at a drop of a hat
Mhm.
for no reason or for weak reasons. Does anybody actually want to be in a community like that? Generally not.
Mhm.
Anyways, yeah, but yeah, the like everything you everything you publicly do as a moderator has an impact on your community. If you're respectful of members externally, how you interact with them, even behind closed doors when you bring them back, uh, the respect you treat with them, how thought out your rules are, and how you explain those rules is quite important. Uh, but at the end of the day, if you're focused on making your community better and are willing to adjust your behavior to make that happen, if you have a respect for your community and want it to grow, and if you care about the well-being of the members in that community, I think those are some of the most central things to doing a good job as a moderator.
All right. Good things to share, and hopefully keep to the mind and understand about it.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And I
so
hope it was interesting for you and the viewers.
yeah, because I'm trying to make sure I'm hoping to get a little bit more understanding of the moderation process and the work that goes into it, because it's not always easy for either the moderator or the member of the community that's seeking the help, or being the one that's being talked to about whatever situation,
Mm-hmm.
because things like that can become very volatile.
Yep.
So it's I'm hoping to get a better understanding in there for it. Uh, so I'm hoping that
Oh,
this helps.
and ask questions, right?
Oh yeah,
Like, yeah, you know, our team, you're in touch with many other moderators from pretty good communities. We don't get to talk about what we do a lot, and we're happy. Most of us are going to be happy to.
yeah. I mean, it's part of
So,
why I talked with the Honeycast team. It's part of why I talked to Newt and Hellboy in one
mhm.
stream. Um, I wanted to be able to get Golden One and Hellbent in here, but personal circumstances basically couldn't let them in to do so today. So hopefully we'll be able to get them both in at a later date to get their experiences about it as well. But
Yep,
I do think that this was a fairly productive discussion that we had today. Being
I
just the
hope
two of
so.
us.
Yeah. No, I
So,
can talk a lot. I think it's useful.
well, I do feel like it can actually be very useful, depending on the circumstance. Because if you just going off and off, the whole time, if there's no focus to it, it can just become like, what did we
Yep.
accomplish?
Yeah.
But yeah, with that being said, I do appreciate you taking the time to discuss this today.
I'm happy to thank you for having me. And for you or for any listeners to this video or the recording that are in the communities I'm in, feel free to ask me any questions if you want to.
Yeah. I will. I didn't think to do so, but I think I should probably. I'm wondering, is there a generally open Discord invite to the Lackadaisy server?
Yep, it's discord.gg/lackadaisy. It's on the main website.
Cool. I'm probably gonna have to get a get a link to that in here for this for the website and for the Discord because
Yep,
it is a very good community that I find very comfortable and
thank you.
welcoming to be in. So yeah, we'll definitely get around to talking with the other two at some point in the future. We'll have to work that out and see what we can do because today just ended up becoming one of those
Just
days.
me. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I do enjoy having this talk. Thank you very much for taking the time on this, and to everybody listening, thank you for tuning in and catching this little discussion. Hopefully, you came away learning as much as I did. That being said, we'll be. Uh, I'm gonna have more. Uh, damn. This is what happens when you don't drink enough water during a 2-hour stream. But I'm looking at next week potentially being a guest that I had on earlier before family circumstances came up with him. A guy by the name of Phil Towell. Anybody who might recognize that name will know he's the guy credited as saving Metallica a while back. Um, and he's worked with multiple high profile musicians and even pro athletes and corporate types. So we'll be having a discussion with him about the kind of work, kind of the mental work that goes into mental and emotional work that goes into entertainment and such. And after that, will be my little. Once we have things nailed down, it'll be the take two with Kennedy Phillips and Chris Moore. So keep an eye on on the hashtag Gab Hominem. We'll have those discussions coming up, and we'll have updates for you on Hellbent and Golden One once those are figured out. Because I do intend to have that discussion, have the same kind of discussion, and get their experiences uh, on the work of moderating and helping out with the community. So uh, thank you again for listening, and I hope you guys all have a wonderful day. All right, you guys all have a wonderful day.